Hello and welcome to our first episode of Groovecast, the podcast for rhythm sections. And I'm Ashley Walker,
And I'm Charlie Smith.
yeah. For those who don't know, Charlie and myself, we're both rhythm section players. I'm a bass player.
And I'm a drummer.
Yeah. Both northerners as well. Although I'm probably considered a southerner to you, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting on that way.
Yeah,
What is
I'm
it?
still developing my accent.
Yeah, anything south of York is southern to us.
Yeah, and this is episode 1, and we're going to be talking about the effects of the past year on musicians, aren't we?
We certainly are. So, of course, at time of recording, we are still somewhat in the midst of a global pandemic. So it's I mean, as far as things are at the moment, normality is starting to open up a little bit, and I think it's safe to say there's work in the diary, and yeah, but it's been a bit of a weird 15, 16 months worth of life. So,
Yeah.
I mean, just to kick it off, I mean, let's have a look at what we're doing now. You know, remote recording. It's been a huge deal the past year, and I think it's something that we've both ended up turning to.
Yeah.
And I suppose over to you to kick us off with how you got into that. Was it before the past year, or has it been more recently?
Yeah, I was actually trying to think about that this morning because I think we'd all sort of done recording before COVID, where you'd have a recording that you wanted somebody to play on, and you'd send it off and everything. But it wasn't really anything that I had got into too much before COVID, sending it off and doing the videos especially. And actually, I just remembered that I think it was just before COVID. We just got a new computer, and we were kind of too frightened to try Logic on it. So it wasn't until COVID actually hit, and then we were like, "All right, we should probably learn how to do this properly."
Yeah, I was definitely late to the game on that one. I mean, drum recording was infinitely complicated, no matter how you wanted to do it. So I'd always kind of shied away. I guess I'd always wanted to try and have some sort of home studio, but I always brushed it away as one of those things that once I'm earning enough money to justify doing it, then I'll do it. But after the pandemic hit, and really for me what it was finishing my degree from home, and the need to be able to record for assessment pieces and all of that kind of thing. So it was about September last year, I ended up I contacted a couple of friends, and all credit for a lot of what has happened since has to go to one of my ACM drum tutors, Harry Younger, because he's an absolute technological whiz. And if you haven't ever gotten into drum recording or anything, you should check out his YouTube channel, Drum Electric, because it just covers so much. And he basically gave me a lot of advice, and I ended up taking the plunge. I bought interface, got some decent mics, and started working, and just started experimenting. It was very, very very much a learning curve, as I'm sure it was for so many people. But
Yeah.
it's gotten to the point now where I can listen to a track with my morning coffee, record it, send it at mid-afternoon, and then have a rough mix delivered back to me before bed. So it's an incredible way for musicians to work, and I think it's definitely, although nothing beats being in a big studio and with a lovely room and a great engineer, I think especially in the short term and on the almost the localized scene of players doing projects or anything like that, I think you'd struggle to be a successful musician, especially a successful freelancer these days, without having some sort of recording capability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's funny actually because that's pretty much how we met, really, doing the online
It
thing.
was, I mean, it was one of those things. I think we both kind of knew of each other through other musicians and through
Mm.
our musical families, if you like, and of course through your roots of being, well, let us say, a borough lad by default. um, but it was one of those things that, yeah, it's strange how the last year has brought a lot of people together, and us being an example of that. And not only that, it's been, I don't know about you, but for me, I've connected with a load of different players over the past year. It's
Mm.
it's it's been ridiculous. I ended up not too far into the pandemic. I ended up chatting with a drummer called Tim Goodyear, who's the West End drummer on Hamilton. So and just out of the blue, struck up a conversation and just decided, well, what harm is having a chat? So we ended up sitting one morning and having a Zoom call for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever, just talking about life, which was just, stuff like that would have never have happened, and I would have definitely not made a few of the connections that I have made
Mm.
without the pandemic, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've both been doing the sort of online recording, like you've said, and getting to grips with it. And I wondered what's some of your top projects that you'd say you've done over the course of the lockdowns and recording.
Yeah, well, it's a funny one really, because ironically, the first recordings I did in the pandemic, even after I'd set my home studio up, were actually up in Newcastle at Blank Studios up there. I went and did
Mm.
an album with Martin Stevenson, which is out now on all platforms. Um, Shameless plug. And that was more your run of the mill professional recording setup. So it was weird that I just bought all this stuff and ready to start recording. And where's your first session? To the studio. But at the same time, it was great because I could pick the brains of the engineers and really get a feel for what I was getting myself in for. But
Mm.
as far as projects I've worked on at home, there's been a few, and I think we can both say there's a couple here that we probably won't talk about that are currently in the works. But there's yeah, I mean, just of late, I really enjoyed doing the ultimate big band things over the course of the past year or so. I started that working through a couple of those tunes just on my own
Mm.
in here, probably October last year, November.
Mm.
One of the first things I'd recorded just to dip my toe in the water, give me a few things that I can put together. I'm not wasting anyone's time if I wasn't happy with it. So I could just take my own time with it, do it how I wanted it, and then put it out and just see what kind of response it got. And it went down great. And for those listeners who don't know, it's the Ultimate Big Band is a project put together by a drummer called Darren Williams and the legendary Lawrence Cottle, who they've basically released a couple of big band tunes where you can download all the backing tracks. You've got all the parts there for drummers and some for bass players as well, and you can have feel like you're recording with a really great big band. And I did two of those last year, and then I brought it back to do the last one literally last week with your good self.
Yeah, it's great fun. It's incredible, really. Kind of the positives, or one of the positives from this whole pandemic and the lockdown, is how much music has been put out there. Because I think everybody in the industry and in arts has understood we've all been going through the same struggle, and not having the feeling of being able to rehearse with a live band or with live players. So what Lawrence and the Ultimate Big Band and everything, what they've done there is just incredible, really, just providing all of that stuff just for you to go ahead and give it a try, and we certainly did.
We did, and it's something that I've seen a lot of players doing, and rightly so, because it's a superb resource, and it's the sort of thing that I think the last year was really needed. You know, whether it's been putting original music out or doing, you know, a lot of people have turned to YouTube and that kind of thing. A lot of people have turned to self-release and self-recording. You know, I've done a fair few remote sessions for different artists up and down the country, and you do get this feeling that everyone just wants to release their creative juices somehow. And you know, in not being able to go and play in front of an audience, then that recorded music or videoed performances, whether done remotely or through a live stream, have absolutely been the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It wasn't really until I think early summer that I got doing some of the recordings with other people, and for those people who don't know, my dad's a musician and Charlie's granddad's one of the best drummers in the country, to be honest. And so with my dad, he has his big band, and so I did a couple of recordings with them. And then Charlie and myself, we've done a few, and got to know each other, and now finally have actually been able to play live together as well, which has been amazing.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, when you think about it, it's been a crazy year, and one that none of us would have seen coming. I mean, just changing tact slightly with about getting into the recording, and something that, of course, led up to all of that for everyone, I think, was that complete lack of motivation at the start of it all. When when everyone's diaries had emptied, when the world ground to a halt, it was almost like a floating in limbo sort of a time. I don't know how you adapted or got back into working, or you know, if you stopped at all. I think everyone dealt with it differently. Just personally, I was in London at the time when lockdown was about to hit, and I got out of there before it did. And returned back up home, and really, for me it was weird. I think I ended up taking about 2 weeks off playing. I didn't pick the sticks up, didn't touch drums, wasn't interested, and I took a couple of weeks off, and then I had a really crazy drive to practice. And then I was, I had the practice pad out every day. I was trying to make sure that, because when you have a day that's not filled with anything, I think having some sort of a routine just really helped me get through that first couple of months of every morning. Right, I'm going to do half an hour on a practice pad, and I'm going to get my hands in shape, which I did, and it definitely served me well. But after the whole lockdowns eased a bit last year, and then went back the other way again. And by the time it got to sort of July time, I think my fuel had ran down, and I was out of steam, and so I ended up taking another month off, and I didn't work, I didn't play. I'd finished university for the year at that point, and I don't know, I just didn't feel any urge to do any sort of musical work. But taking a break was probably the best thing I could have done, because when I came back to it, I felt so much fresher, and everything was almost fell back into place to continue where I'd left off.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with that. A similar thing. When the first sort of lockdown hit, I was literally just starting my first summer season here in Skegness, and obviously it all got ground to a halt, and it was kind of the other way around, I'd say, actually, for me. I mean, I was kind of not practicing more, but it was good. I was trying to have a routine still of get up, have some breakfast, do some exercise or something to, fill your day. What better way to do?
All that 30 minutes that you were allowed.
Yeah, try and touch my toes, put my socks on. And then go in the music room and just try and practice for an hour or so. And And I have to say, one of the things that really, because it was quite down those first few months, not knowing, if we were going to be able to gig again, um, one of the things that really inspired me was a video that Louis Dowdswell did with his big band, and he did the arrangement of Into the Unknown from Frozen.
Oh yeah, absolutely class. If you haven't seen that video, you should go and check it out. It's incredible band, and of course Greg Bissonette on drums, who's just smoking it, but just so good.
Yeah, Greg on drums, Lawrence Costle on bass, Gordon Goodwin on. It's just incredible. Like, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I must admit that I almost overlooked all the other players when I saw Lawrence was on bass. I was just had my jaw was on the floor for the whole thing. But
that was so beautifully put together, and there's been a few different things since then as well. I mean, just recently, I watched one last week that had just come out of that Gordon Goodwin had put together with, I think it was the World Big Band or something, and I can't remember the title of it, but so good. And another one of those, a really great tune done by brilliant players.
Yeah.
And you just thought, it can't really get better than this when as far as what we're dealing with and what we're putting up with. It was so just great to see that level of musicianship again, because it's something that, especially not having been to live gigs over the past year or so, that you do miss. You miss seeing great players and great bands and great setups doing some amazing gigs.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better. I mean, it's one of the best feelings I've ever experienced is going to see live shows, whether it's in an arena or at Ronnie Scott's, or when you explain to people, I've just seen this, concert or this band that you're really into anyway, or even a band you're not into, and you can just appreciate the musicianship. It's really tough describing the feeling you get just seeing that, and the inspiration. And I kind of had that feeling come back a little bit with when that video came out, and it was almost a bit of not a light bulb moment, but a thing of, this is going to come back eventually in some form. And I mean, fortunately, I count myself as one of the luckiest kind of musicians this year, because I have, unlike you, I kind of forgot in July, you didn't have any work really, whereas I managed to get some outdoor things, and I did manage to get a few gigs over the summer, and my summer season that was meant to start in March started in August, so I managed to still get a couple months in to see me through anyway.
Yeah, it was strange for me. I think it was because I'd lived in London for a couple of years, and then of course being back in the north, it wasn't like I was in a working band at the time. So what my sole income was really was the live theatre work and doing a lot of that. And of course all of that went completely at that point. There was no gigs at all. So it took me about 15 months between doing my last gig in February last year to doing my first gig back about a month ago.
Yeah. With my band.
With you, yeah, exactly. It was one of those strange occurrences where it was like, I haven't played for 15 months, and then, it was just a joyous feeling to be able to do it again, and I didn't mind, at all having to, it was, what was it, a 350-mile round trip.
Yeah.
But I didn't care. I was going to play a gig. I would have drove to France if that had meant doing a gig. It was it was one of those really strange things of the things that we would have maybe moaned about last year of 3 hours to do a show or whatever drive, and now we were looking forward to it like it was like it was a family holiday or something.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, I'll drive 9 hours to come and do a pub gig for 50 quid. Of course, it was so weird having that, and I don't know how you felt about it, but just having that excitement in sort of the build up to it, of thinking, I'm actually going to do a gig, And I mean, for you, it was probably after that the whole lockdown again from November to March, April. So it was, having those months off, and you do miss it,
Yeah.
It's a funny thing with musicians. We moan about it a lot. We moan about the tedium of some live gigs, or the annoyance that things cause us, or the little niggles. We all seem to moan about them profusely, but what we all wouldn't have what we all would have given to go and do a show after however long it was. I think everyone just had this sense of, I don't care if the the situation's tricky, or it's a loading up 4 flights of stairs. I just want to do the work.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like I say, my sort of season finished in October, and then it went back into the whole lockdown thing in November, I think. And I mean, at that point, it was, once it started to be lifted, it was like, oh, foot on the gas, let's try and get as many gigs. I mean, after my season finished, I tried to get more gigs with my own band, and then that all got ground to a halt again. And yeah, it was quite, demoralising for those couple of months between sort of December and January. And then, I mean, fortunately for me, the season that I have been doing is, they're able to socially distance, and because it's a holiday park, they were allowed to open earlier. So sort of, and then with my own band, I was able to do some outdoor gigs with them around sort of Skegness and locally. So it was kind of earlier for me, and sort of, I think, just the end of April or something, I managed to get a few things in. And then and then we got that couple of gigs in Butlins, which is what Charlie joined us for.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's to be honest, the holiday parks have been the saviour for me, as far as getting work for the foreseeable. It's been, I mean, even still, even though the restrictions are due to ease and all that, the theatres aren't opening at capacity until generally around early September. So that strain of income, if you like, is just not there, and it hasn't been. But I've been lucky with a few contacts like yourself who've getting and doing some holiday park gigs have been, it's been the thing that's able to, I don't know, not only get me out and working, which is where I want to be, but also, keep the accountant happy. So it's been a saviour. And just the past 3 or 4 weeks, I've had a few different gigs, starting with of course you in Skegness, and then a couple down at Flamingo Land in North Yorkshire at the holiday park there. And I've got a rather busy July and August thanks to that. It's been it was something I wouldn't have thought I would have been doing at all. If you'd asked me a year ago, I probably wouldn't have imagined I'd have been playing that kind of thing. But it's generally good gigs. It's nice and laid back. You turn up, you read your dots, and you do your bit. There's no rehearsals or anything most of the time, and it's just the success of those gigs is the audience happy, is the artist happy, did you get, was it an enjoyable show? And 9 times out of 10 they're great to do. They're really not too taxing, and it's probably the same with your summer season. You do your gigs, you read your dots, and you try and have a bit of fun out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny because going into the summer season last year, it was like the first time for me doing anything like that, backing acts, properly backing the acts. And just as I was starting to get into the flow of it, it all got halted. And then in August, September, it restarted, and kind of got into the flow of it again, but it wasn't quite the same because not everyone could be back at work and everything. And now this year, I mean, it's, we're all back and back in acts, and it's just great. It's doing it's, you can't really get that experience anywhere else. I mean, of sort of reading, sight reading every night and stuff. I think it's a good thing, and yeah, just having a nice time. And I'm sure Ashley from a couple of years ago would have found some negatives or something to moan about. But I'm just happy to be there, socialising with other people, which hasn't happened for a long time.
Yeah.
And always meeting new people as well with the acts that come, and despite the restrictions of the socially distancing and everything, the people that have been coming are generally it's still full, and they're just happy to be out and having a holiday.
I think it's ironic to say it, considering, but 2020 especially, I think, has been the year of networking.
Yeah.
Strange as it is, considering no one saw anyone, it was the year of, doing Zoom calls, having different, getting to hang out with different musicians. I think that the two key things that got me through it as a drummer were the first one was the drum hangs started by Russ Gleason and Neil Wilkinson, which have been going on for the past year, and it just started as just Neil being one of the best session drummers in the country, and he'd just hop on for a couple of hours on a Saturday afternoon, talk some drums, maybe talk through a few ideas that he'd been working on, and then it ended up kind of getting some momentum, and they started getting some guests in, and they had Steve Gaddin, they had Vinnie Colaiuta, they had Leland Sklar. It was, and they've had so many players of different ilks and different things, and you just think a year ago you wouldn't have imagined being in an intimate Zoom call with some of the greatest musicians in the world.
Yeah.
And you just think this is beyond crazy, and it's something that I'm really glad that they put together. And I think I was in one of the first couple of hangs, and you could see that everyone in there was just so happy to be seeing other drummers, for starters, to be swapping ideas, to having that conversation. And there was drummers on there who you would have never otherwise come across on the just on the British scene, who you then looked at and thought, God, they're good, and then you might strike conversations up, and the whole drum hangs thing has been a massive success for them for the past year, and I'm so glad it took off like it did, because I think everyone, especially in the music industry, needed that kind of thing. And the other one for me, on a personal level, and a lot more intimate, has been I've been doing a Zoom hang every other weekend with a few drummers. That was started off by a friend of mine in London, and we get, it's less than 10 people most times, but you've got guys over in Canada or the States or New Zealand or wherever, and we just sit for hours on end chatting about drums or life or music or anything. And you do think, what, if nothing else, that last year has given me those 6 or 7 new mates who I would have never have otherwise had, and people who I would have totally not connected with otherwise, because you're not going to naturally just strike up a conversation with the drummer in New York. It doesn't generally happen. But out of that, personally, I've met some amazing players, and some really nice people, and in that particular hang, we are all gearheads. We love our drums, we love our equipment, and that generally drives it. It's been so, what's better than hopping on a webcam and talking about the metal that you use in cymbals, or which snare drum sounds better or looks better, and I blame those guys for making me buy so much equipment through the pandemic, because we just had these conversations, and it was like, I think, oh yeah, I should try one of those at some point. My bank account wasn't happy about it, but
No.
but some great things have come out of that, and I think just in the last year, my snare drum count has hopped from where it was at about 10 to around 15. So it's been a great year for gear acquisition. It's just not been the best year for using it.
That's true. Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, I think I'd like to say a thank you to. I think the Musicians Union have done really great at putting some of those courses out there, and the hangs, and there was a couple of courses that I was really glad to be on, to do with Instagram and social networking and podcasts and
funny that.
Yeah. So the tools have been out there, and I think that's really true, that it has been a great year for networking, despite the fact that a lot of us haven't had any gigs, and the ones we have been kind of few and far apart. But it's kind of, although there was a lot of negatives, there were positives there to take out of it, and it's kind of now coming into the summer of 2021, and there's starting to be light at the end of the tunnel, and it's now implementing that, and the positivity of being able to gig again now. I think we'll all have, really, for quite a while.
Yeah, and I think it's also it's been weird connecting with people of our kind. So I mean, as a drummer, how often do you go on a gig and talk to another drummer? It doesn't happen unless you're doing a festival. Maybe it doesn't really happen that often.
Yeah.
It's so being able to broaden your network of people of your own kind, if you like. For you, you'll probably come across other bass players who you've not heard about before, or you've not come across, and you think, they're smoking hot player, and you just think, I wouldn't have found these sorts of people without having the last year of the time to look for them, if you like, and the time for that certain thing to come out of the woodwork and show itself.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually a really good point. You don't think about that. You don't mix with your own sort of kind, if you like. Sounds like a race or something. Bass players, that come from the island of bass. Yeah. You don't mix with those people, but that is very true. Yeah.
Yeah, the Colonies.
the Colonies. Yeah. So I wondered if for you now, coming back into gigging, and you did that gig with my band, and is there anything that you've kind of realised, that problems that you sort of forgot about, say for like guitarists or bass players, it would have been blisters, or is there anything like that?
Well, I think it wasn't so much in blistering or callousing or anything, because I tended to keep my hands in shape as best I could. In fact, to be honest, my hands are in better shape now than they probably ever were, thanks to the last year or so of having the time to sit and work on my technique. And I had good technique before, but I've just been able to build upon that and get to a place where I'm really comfortable. I mean, of course, there's still things I want to look at and develop further, but it's really brought my overall standard of playing has come way higher than it ever was, thanks to not only having the time to practice, but also having the guidance of some great tutors through university, the likes of Neil Bullock, and studying with him for 3 or 4 months was just superb. Getting to learn from arguably one of the best British jazz drummers around was so nice, and just having that freedom to put those ideas into motion. Where if you'd have been working and busy, you would have. I might have took that lesson and then just had to go straight to a gig. Yeah. I didn't have the time to actually think about and digest it and then work on stuff. So as far as all of that went, I was pretty okay. What I wasn't prepared for was the stamina of it. You forget how challenging playing at 2 45-minute sets are. It wears you. And funnily enough, doing the thing with you, it wasn't that day. I didn't really feel it so much on the night. You come off really hot and sweaty
on
and
a
all
high
that, but
as well.
and on a high. But I didn't think about it until about 2 days later, and I just thought, God, I'm knackered. It really took it out of me in a way that I didn't expect.
Yeah.
Because of course I did the gig. The following day I drove home, and then the day after that I think I just crashed I just thought I'd forgotten how tiring gigs can be, because you get used to it, and we will get used to it again of it just becoming routine. But it took me by surprise how strenuous a 90 minutes worth of playing can be.
Yeah. For me personally, it was in this sort of coming out of this last lockdown, was less sort of challenging, with blisters or whatever, because I had been practicing and writing my own stuff and recording every day. So I was making sure that I was warmed up and everything, ready to go. But going into the summer of last year, when I was able to do some outdoor gigs with my own band, it can be, especially at some of those, last year doing a few sort of pub gigs, and people were like really happy to be out, and it was quite, you could feel the energy from the people. So then you were playing harder and putting everything into it. And the first couple of gigs, the amount of blisters and like blood blisters and like all that stuff, that's what sort of got to me the first couple of gigs back. And I know also just from friends of mine who are singers, and them personally, it's like, even though they've been practicing in lockdown, some of them don't have the facility to practice properly, and even if you can do your scales and warm up, it's not the same as having to belt out a power ballad or something live to a few hundred people, so that's why I asked, because I think we've all been having different experiences with that.
It is, and you know what the other thing has been? It's been after a year of playing on your own, and especially if you're recording a lot, playing a lot to clicks and things, and then doing that first gig back, I was mentally, with you, I was mentally thinking about tempos way more than I expected to. I was thinking, am I right here, or is the adrenaline getting to me? Am I racing a bit? And because you can't really tell. You've just got to try and think of it and trust yourself, which I'd totally forgotten about. Doing that, the other holiday park gigs I've done has all been on click, so there's never been really any doubt there. But having that, getting back to having that internal clock, if you like,
metronome,
of trusting in yourself to be still at roughly the same tempo that you started, and not going away like a racehorse or dragging it or whatever.
Yeah,
I definitely was really honed in on that, because it's one of those things that it's so hard to measure in the moment. You've just got to kind of trust that you're right, and that if you do think it's, and something I've always gone for is I listen to the vocalist more than anything, because if you can usually tell through the vocal phrasing if something's either too quick or too slow.
Yeah.
And as long as you can ballpark it into the right area, you can generally get away with, a little bit of push and shove as far as tempos go. But yeah, it was just weird getting back into that way of thinking, because when you sit and play on your own for a year, everything that you're playing to is generally going to be in time, so you don't even think about it. You just think, am I with the track? Am I with the click? Yes, no, maybe, whatever. And so when the onus is put back on you as the timekeeper, yeah, it's again, it's like having to get the cogs back in motion.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know as well, with other musicians, what they've been like, the ones who have been able to gig again, is sort of nerves and dealing with that, because I know personally from myself, after the first lockdown, and playing by yourself, going into the first couple of gigs, I think I was probably, and also going into the Butlins ones and the one that you did, I'd probably had more nerves than I ever had before, because I was still getting used to having to, okay, we're actually playing to real people again.
Yeah, I think you always have that, especially for the first couple back, I definitely had that niggling doubt of, can I still do this?
Yeah.
It's been, it had been at that point about 15 months, and I was thinking, am I still able to do what I was doing before?
Yeah.
Because you don't know. Can I trust that I'm able to sight read all these charts and play to a click track? Because I've not had to do it in a live stage environment with an audience watching you. And it was that first holiday park gig after I'd done yours, doing it was a Coldplay show in Flamingo Land, and there must have been, it was outdoors, and there must have been about 1,000 people there. And I've got to say, walking on there, I don't often feel nervous before I play. I've kind of gotten past that. It's like walking to work. But I did look out and I did think, God, I hope I don't mess this up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was such a weird feeling of like, I just had to trust that I could, that my reading was still where it was, which it was, because I'd ran through everything myself just to make sure I was happy. But even still, you look at your charts and you think, God, I hope I can still read these after all this time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that actually, because I think that's kind of what happened to me restarting in September last year, was the reading thing, and even though I had been practicing and trying to find new stuff to play over the course of the first lockdown, and testing your sight reading and everything, I think it was the thing of playing. It's a totally different beast playing live and having a chart, and if the singer, for instance, goes wrong, or if whatever the keys player or the drummer or any of you go wrong, it's then, okay, well, what do we do now? And you get used to that when you've played for ages, but there was almost a sense of forgetting about that, and like following the singer or following.
That's the thing, and the other thing is you can't ever rehearse that. There's no way of properly simulating that on your own in a rehearsal room or in your home studio. You can't do it because you'll never feel the pressure that you feel on a gig. It's totally different feeling to walk out knowing that that you're being relied upon to keep this together, or to do your job right. And that responsibility felt really strange. Again, coming back to it after all that time, because there really isn't a way of practicing it. And I don't think although I went through a lot of pages of sheet music through the lockdowns and everything, I didn't look at anything sort of remotely show charty. So anything that would resemble what I'm looking at now and what I'm writing now, a lot of that I didn't bother with. I looked at some musical theatre charts, which are way more complicated and detailed, and you've got so much going on. Or I was looking at big band charts, which are the opposite of that, where it's giving you the figures and giving you a different point of reference. But when you go back to doing something like the holiday park shows, where most things are written out in black and white for you, what they want and what's, especially if you've got a backing track going at the same time, because no matter what the singer or whoever does, you're kind of glued to that backing track. You can't really stray from it. The only thing you can do is, if anything gets out of line, you can either try and pull it back or give the signal to just lose the backing track and go live. Which there is nothing scarier than having to make that call sometimes, and just doing some things. If you get, I've done gigs and got the band end up a bar out from the click, say, and you can't predict this. You can't help it. Sometimes it could be anything that, it could be as simple as the track not giving you the full counting or something. Anything, and you can. And especially as a drummer, you've got to kind of take onus on that quite a lot of the time, because as a bassist or a guitarist, you're kind of tied to what chords you're playing. You can't really move from that. If you're going to try and jump back to the bar where you need to be, chances are you're going to clash with whatever the other guy's doing on stage. Whereas as a drummer, you can make that move, but you've just got to make it as glaringly obvious as possible to everybody else to say, I know where we are, and I know what I'm going to do to get us out of this.
Yeah.
And it's not until you have those moments that you remember almost what's gone before.
Yeah. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our time here.
I think so.
I was gonna think a good way to end off, maybe to finish this off, would be what kind of things have you got coming up, and we are sort of talking about now being back gigging and the positives, and hope, fingers crossed, for most musicians that we're now starting to get gigs in the diary. And what have you got coming up lately?
Yeah, so for me, I've got a lot of holiday park gigs coming up the next couple of months, mostly with Pure Entertainment Group, who are based up here in the north, and all thanks to the MD Tom for getting me involved with that. It's really been quite the saviour of late. But that aside, kind of starting September is I've got the Islands in the Stream show coming back, and it'll be great to be going back on the road with them. And I've got a tour in the books with Martin Stevenson and the Dainties, which will be really nice. And just as far as what I've got right now, I've got a couple of recording projects going on. I've got a couple of songs for the new Dainties album that I'll be doing from home, and yeah, just trying to keep us as busy as possible in between the gigs, until they're back out in full flow again. But yeah, what about yourself? So what have you got planned in?
Yeah, coming up, well, by the time this podcast's out, it would have been a few weeks ago, but coming up, the most recent thing I've got is the first sort of theatre gig I would have done in about 2 years or something, I suppose, at the Embassy Theatre here in Skegness, with my dad, which will be very enjoyable, I'm sure. Many laughs will be had. And
I for sure.
Which I'm really excited about, because it's sort of the first, the first sort of cabaret thing I would have done in a while, and playing some really great tunes as well. So, and then again, just my summer season's still going, and a couple of gigs lined up in the summer with my own band, and fingers crossed some more stuff with you, hopefully. More projects.
let's hope so. And yeah, that kind of wraps us up for this one. But as always, mate, it's been a pleasure having a chat with you, and we shall see everyone next time on the next episode of Groovecast.
Yeah, thanks for listening.